Hello, and a very warm welcome to everyone who's dialed into our fireside chat today. So, this chat is going to be around the triple sector approach to achieve decarbonization goals. And we are going to have amongst us Ms. Gauri Singh and Dr. Satish Kumar. Ms. Gauri Singh is the Deputy Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency. She brings over 30 years of experience in policy, advocacy, and project implementation within renewable energy and sustainable development from India and the international system. Alongside, I have Dr. Satish Kumar, who is the Executive Director and President of AEEE. So I'm going to please request both of them to come on this stream. And Dr. Satish Kumar, kindly take over from here. Thank you. Dr. Satish, you're on mute, please.
Okay. Just give me 1 second. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can. All perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. So, thank you, Afsa, and good afternoon, everybody. We have Madam Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General for IRENA, with us for the fireside chat. I will be speaking with her over the next hour or so. Madam Gauri Singh, what a privilege to be hosting you for this fireside chat. Uh, welcome and welcome to Feed, and which is our AEEE flagship event. Um, would you want to start with your opening comments to orient people about IRENA, and how do you see energy efficiency and renewable energy working together to solve one of the most challenging problem that mankind is facing right now?
Thank you, Satish ji, and namaskar, and thank you for inviting me to Feed. And it's a privilege to be here today. I think we're really having this conversation at a time when we are seeing a growing momentum world over of the urgency to take climate actions, and in the context of what we've seen global leaders, economies committing to. I think it's very interesting because it seems that the whole pandemic situation has really accelerated the change that countries have had on what they did think they wanted to do for climate actions. So in this space, the International Renewable Energy Agency, that's headquartered in Abu Dhabi, and we have an office in Bonn. Uh, for the last 1 decade of our existence, the agency has done a lot of analytical work on renewables. So, if you would recall, in 2011, when this got set up, the whole agenda of renewables energy efficiency was not mainstreamed. It was, people were asking questions about why we should have renewables. So then, that time, the work that we focused on was really more of bringing very evidence based and analytical based reasoning to governments who are members of IRENA, to make them look at the policy direction that they need to be taking. IRENA now has 167 countries as its member, so nearly universal membership. And I think we've come a long way in terms of not just looking at renewable energy. And of course, a lot of our work is focused on policies in renewables, how the markets are evolving, the regulations that are coming out in different countries, the best practices that are emerging. But our Bonn office really focuses on innovation, on technology, of which is emerging, and also they do a lot of work on even standards. So in effect, what IRENA does is, on the one side, engages with private sector, on the other engages with the ministries of energy from various countries, to bring them on the table to have discussions on what are the some of the issues that are not being able for countries to attract investments. So we are also now proposing to have very focused investment forums to engage with investors that are now becoming much more eager to spend money in renewables and in green technologies, to look at policies in national governments and to do the kind of facilitation that is required to make sure that investments do happen in countries. So our role in that sense, while we do have flagship publications that we come out every year, our role is now much more mainstream because of this whole thing coming under the larger umbrella of energy transition. So from renewables, we had really becoming a mainstream actor in the energy transition space. So our publication, called the World Energy Transition Outlook, tries to encapsulate our work at the global level. And we also have plans of going to regions to do deep dives in the regional frameworks, to come out with roadmaps and scenarios on how the countries and the regions are going to be moving.
Thank you, madam. And how do you see renewable energy and energy efficiency working together in this pivotal decade? Because, as you know, Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy, we work on the demand side of things. And knowing that countries are setting net zero targets and decarbonization goals, what are your thoughts in terms of these twin major policy tools or technology tools? How do they need to work together to address this massive challenge?
So let me address this in two parts. One is, clearly, when you're looking at renewable energy, now of course it's become very cost competitive. But even so, bringing in renewable energy into a system that is not efficient makes no sense. So whenever you're looking at renewable energy, the other side of the coin really is energy efficiency, and that kind of a connect is often forgotten. And you have because renewable energy, as you can imagine, is much more glamorous, because it means putting out these solar plants and these wind farms and other technologies, whereas energy efficiency is much more intangible, so to say, in terms of the saving that it does, or the improvement that it does in the overall rate of energy intensity. So when we came out with our flagship publication this year, last year, we basically identified 6 pillars that are going to be the key for moving towards a net zero future, or at least looking at a 1.5-degree scenario. And in that, if you look at the pillars, they were renewables, which whether directly or through power, was one pillar. Energy efficiency was the second. Electrification of end use, especially buildings and transport, was the third. Green hydrogen was obviously another very big component that's emerging. And looking at the bioenergy, with the modern bioenergy with carbon capture. was pretty much the other pillar. So for us, when we look at renewable energy, the concomitant really is energy efficiency, because if you look at also our projections into 2050, we are currently improving our rate of energy intensity by 1.2% a year. Whereas we feel that this has to be nearly 2.5 times, going up to 2.9%. So it's only when we are able to reach the rate of improvement of energy intensity by 2.9% annually, that's the kind of a trajectory that will lead us to a 1.5-degree scenario. And in this trajectory, energy efficiency is a very, very critical component, because without that piece coming in, we are not going to see the trajectory move in the direction that we want it to move.
So, Gauri Madam, I think at AEEE we sometimes use this leaky pot syndrome. So, what you are essentially saying is that for renewable energy to be most effective, we just need to make sure that our appliances, buildings, vehicles, everything needs to be as efficient as it can be. And then I think go for the renewable energy options. That will probably be the most cost optimized approach. So I'm just changing gears a little bit. As someone who has served in the Indian Administrative Service and as a leader of a global think tank on renewable energy, which is doing cutting edge work related to data and investments, uh, in your view, who are the actors or who are the organizations or countries you believe which are going to adopt like energy efficiency and renewable energy and benefit from it the most, and perhaps set the pace or examples for others to follow in the near term? And why do you think so?
So, the way the global investment is currently moving, there are obviously some regions which are market leaders in terms of attracting investments, and in that you have Europe, China, and the US attracting a lot of investments. Investments are also growing in India, but I think the pace of investments that needs to grow is still not matching our ambitions that have been laid out by the Honorable PM. So, which means that the financial market still has certain bottlenecks that need to be sorted for the investments to come in at the level that we want. Just to give you a global perspective on the kind of investment we will need for up to 2050. Currently, when we consolidated the national strategies and the planned investments that countries had stated for their climate pathways, then we found that we are looking at something like US dollars 98 trillion US dollars between now and 2050. However, what's needed to make that energy transition happen is an additional 33 trillion US dollars, which will bring it to about 131 trillion US dollars by 2050. What that translates to at a annual level is about 4.4 trillion US dollars annually. Now that perhaps when you hear it, it's a very large number, but when you are looking at the global capital markets and their turnover, then their turnover is around 200 trillion US dollars. So it's not as if you're looking at something that's not achievable. What's probably needed is that if you have the right kind of risk mitigation measures in place and a proper mechanisms to manage the off-takers' risk, then investments will come in. Because, as you would have also heard, a large number of very large banks, in fact, more than 100 large banks, their board of directors have given them mandates to move out of assets in fossil fuel and go for investments in green energy. So this investment will obviously go to those countries which have the frameworks that can attract this investment, where the risks are managed, the off-taker mechanisms are in place, and there's a strong policy in place. So there is going to be this shift in capital that we will see in the next decade. And if India has to take advantage of it, we need to understand what are bottlenecks to make sure that we get them sorted for these investment flows to come in.
Madam, as you are aware, there is a significant impetus, and you alluded to it, that the older energy systems, and there is literally, I think, tens or hundreds of trillions of dollars of investment that is there, which is fossil fuel powered, and that is not going to turn over overnight. So there's a significant thrust to decarbonize the power sector by significantly ramping up the share of renewables. And this has also taken a pretty urgent form, as hard to abate sectors are looking at green hydrogen as one of the decarbonization strategy where thermal energy is used. We'd like to know your thoughts on what IRENA is doing in this area, um, and especially in the context of the integrated resource planning, where some of the gaps or intermittency requirements could also actually be filled very, very elegantly with the help of energy efficient technologies.
So I think, Satish, one of the things that I really feel about how energy efficiency as a sector has evolved in India, and I mean, my own impression is that the ESCOs that were supposed to be the vehicles of taking energy efficiency to the building sector and to the other sectors, that model has not taken off to the extent that it should have. For example, in the renewables, I think the whole ecosystem around IPPs has really taken off to the level that it's a very strong ecosystem that has got built. But I think there are many market mechanisms in energy efficiency that have been tried and tested, piloted, and seen successfully in their life cycle in many other countries. And I think what's really the need is to be able to look at those mechanisms and create a policy where it opens up the space for private sector to come in and to create the business models that will take energy efficiency vehicles to be able to achieve the kind of intervention that we want to see. Now, very clearly, I mean, I'll give you an example of shaving peak loads. I don't think we've even gone there. We all know the duck-shaped curves, and we talk a lot about it. But there are mechanisms, market mechanisms that can allow a shift in the loads that are good for the distribution company, that's good for the consumers, and good for the private sector interventions to come in to do the kind of aggregations that we are talking of. And I am not sure we have created that space, or even if that space is there at some level, I don't think we've really pushed for that kind of a policy to to create those mandates which renewables had the privilege of getting support from, mandates like the RPO or the solar RPO, which pretty much created that environment of getting in the demand and the off takers for the capacity that was getting generated from renewables. So I think there's a lot of policy space that needs to be created, and I think we have in India the a very vibrant private sector that will definitely be able to take that and run with it.
I just want to come back to you mentioned ESCO, which has been a topic of discussion for decades in terms of scaling up efficiency investments in India using a range of technologies, and we have also worked in that space. So just wanted to take a few moments to discuss this a little bit more. Do you think that what has worked in favor of renewables, whereas energy efficiency scaling has not happened, I think, to the same level? Is it that the technology itself is easier to explain? There are fewer technologies to work with, whereas in efficiency, there are literally limitless number of technologies. Do you think, is it because of the measurement and verification, which ultimately I think it gets us to the settlement mechanism? I think even investors are actually making the investments and they need to be paid off, I think, in a clearer, transparent fashion. Or do you also think that it's that risk capital has taken up renewables, I think, in a much bigger way, whereas the story for energy efficiency keeps getting muddled for whatever reason, or just the transaction costs are high? So, what do you think are some of the reasons, in your opinion, where efficiency world can actually do better and we can learn from renewables?
So I think I'm a great believer in what policy can do and a good policy framework can do. Uh, I think what I'm really missing is a good policy framework for energy efficiency. Whatever has been tried, whether in ESCOs or otherwise, and like what you said, there is of course it's not, energy efficiency cannot be one technology, but it's a huge host of appliances that come together as a system to give you the end result. But that still, that being the case, I don't think we have really stepped into the space of having a coordinated energy efficiency policy in place at a national level. And when I say that, what I mean is that energy efficiency is not just about the power equipment or the electrical equipment. It's also about how do you get it into the building regulations and the building space, and what kind of mandates can be driven by that. And it's also into the electrical or the transportation that the transportation sector. Now what that means is that you're not looking at a ad hoc one kind of a solution, um, um space for private sector to occupy. I think we've reached that kind of maturity where the private sector, whether it is architects, whether it is energy efficiency certified uh, uh, persons operating in here, or their appliance manufacturers, or even the transport industry. I think there is a in the private sector there is a broad understanding of what can happen. But I think that connect between what the private sector has and is capable of doing, and the policy coming together to give it that impetus, I think that's the connect that hasn't happened. And I think it's just something that's waiting to happen, because the 500 gigawatts that's now being the broad target that has to be achieved. You can't do it without bringing in energy efficiency in a very, very as a very important player in the game. And we will otherwise, we'll just be struggling with trying to keep pace with the increasing demand in for energy, whereas we're not looking at managing the demand side, doing the demand side management.
Gauri, madam, you may have, I'm sure you have heard about our Prime Minister's Panchamrit commitments that he made at COP26. And of course, I mean, if you look at all the five commitments that he made, it looks like there is clearly a very, very important role for energy efficiency that is embedded in it. I think going back to the point that you are making, that for a country of the size of India and as diverse as it is, it will make sense. I just want to touch upon just a couple of things where he has talked about a reduction of 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide reductions by 2030. And then there is a second one where he's talking about a 45% reduction in the energy intensity of Indian economy by 2030. And you have alluded to some of the work that Irina has done, where you are seeing that I think most of these national targets will have to be met together with efficiency and with renewables working together. Have you seen? I think you said that there are 167 member countries where IRENA is active, and you are working with the governments or heads of states of these people. So, what example would you like to share with us where you see that can be a model, not just for India, but I would say for this planet, in terms of some country which has done a remarkably good job of working both with the energy efficiency and the renewable energy sector?
So I think most of the examples are coming from Europe, because of the very, very huge emphasis on energy efficiency that's going hand in hand with whatever is getting planned in the Green Deal, the European Green Deal. And let me just take an example of the building stock that exists in Europe. Now, um, the first cut analysis actually shows that about 30% of the efficiency gains will actually come from uh, doing retrofits to these building stock that are obviously going to still exist in 2050. And that is actually the building is, and in Europe it's mostly district heating, that's a district heating through gas, that's really the way forward. But uh, they are really now looking at how do you get these end use sectors like the buildings where the stock is going to remain into combining to get them more electrified. And that electrification comes in from renewables, but at the same time it's coming in into a efficient system within those buildings. So luckily for us, I think we are still in the stage where our infrastructure stock will continue to grow. And that being the case, I mean, we don't have district heatings, but in India, cooling is going to be a very major component. Are we only looking at electricity as being able to provide the cooling, or are we also looking at other measures that need to be embedded into our into our regulations and to be mandated, which could be around solar passive architecture, it could be around heat pumps coming in. And those are really the kind of measures that we will have to go towards. And whether we like it or not, energy efficiency, you can't it's a great thing that has happened about the aggregation of the demand, which has got the cost of LEDs down, and we're looking at doing similar things with other things. But still, if we see in our country, cooling and pumping will will stay extremely important. And unless we have also mechanisms that we enable for market players to come in and work with discoms and regulators, providing them the space to actually operate, to manage demand side interventions, we will not really get, because now most of these demand side mechanisms are very much technology led, and the aggregators that are market players work both with the consumers on one side and with the regulators. But that's still a space that I think is very, very nascent in India. And there's a huge space that's really waiting to get occupied and to be opened up.
Madam, I want to follow up on this because you touched upon cooling as I think one of the largest end use loads that India is likely to have. I think both because we are in a tropical climate, we are living in a warming planet, and the appliance penetration, whether it's fans or air coolers, and definitely refrigerant based cooling technologies, is still fairly low in India. And yet, if you look at the peak cooling demand, it's almost 25 to 30% of the national peak electricity demand is going towards cooling. So cooling, of course, there is a lot of work that AEEE is doing. We have a very futuristic looking and a very visionary India Cooling Action Plan, where Ministry of Environment is working with all the other ministries to actually set aggressive policies and also look at different kind of technologies that can actually help India, I think, provide thermal comfort to 1 billion lives. Yet, I just want to touch upon, you mentioned heat pumps. And if you look at India, we see that ground source heat pump, which some people believe is a renewable energy technology. I mean, because you are really tapping, I think, Earth has a heat sink for the loads, I think, that we are likely to see there. And yet, technologies like ground source heat pump and even air source heat pump are not that prevalent in a country like India. I'm not even talking about solar cooling, solar absorption cooling, and some of the other cooling related technologies where renewable has an important role to play. So how do you see? I think, given that India is likely to experience a very, very large cooling load, India will always be extremely vulnerable. I think when it comes to providing thermal comfort to everybody. And in the future, people are saying that if our wet bulb temperature is going to reach 33, 34 degrees Celsius, then that becomes very, very difficult for human survival also, I think. And some of the regions are already starting to experience for very few periods of time, but that's very, very uncomfortable. So I think from both, again, I am coming back to this common theme that we have the technology, and I think, of course, electrification is going to be very, very important. So that goes without saying. But apart from, I think, the larger electrification, what are some of the other technologies, I think, where renewable energy can actually play a pretty important role in satisfying, especially the cooling demand, which is a major, major concern for government, as well as, I think, for organizations like AEEE and many other peer organizations and private sector organizations.
So, Satish, I think one of the really good interventions, and I don't know how much of energy efficiency is really built into it, but this whole initiative of smart cities, which is an initiative to make our new stock of infrastructure much smarter and hopefully energy efficient and greener and more sustainable. I think that is an intervention which I mean, I've seen it more on the side of how it's getting implemented. Unfortunately, what I see, it's much more around real estate development rather than bringing in these features of how it can be like a net zero, or at least closer to net zero kind of a setup with ambient temperatures getting maintained because of both green energy and energy efficiency measures being built into it. Now, I think that, to my mind, is a initiative where there's going to be a lot of government spending, and government also spends a lot of money in creating infrastructure, whether in rural areas or in urban areas. And these are infrastructures that get designed without any thought of how they become energy efficient and become green. So I think it's and it'll not happen on an ad hoc basis by some regulation coming in or something. It has to actually the whole narrative around energy efficiency has to change.
Mhm.
And what we really see missing in the national discussions is this entire narrative on how important and how core energy efficiency is if we have to see our targets of reduced energy intensity and 500 gigawatts of renewable energy coming into the system. And that, unless we really can build on that narrative, that it becomes just as visible as a narrative around emission, we will not really see that change in the mindset happening. And my own thinking is that this will happen only if we have a coordinated policy framework across the many ministries working together, whether it's the Ministry of Environment which brings it, but I think Ministry of Environment is much more normative. What
Mhm.
we probably need is for the more implementation oriented ministries like the Ministry of Power, the Ministry of Urban Affairs, the Ministry of Industry, to actually come together and to be able to come out with this very strong coordinated policy which gives the right incentives and creates creates the space for the private sector to come in much more aggressively than it has done now.
No, you are so right. I think we have also seen some of these same issues, I think, facing and plaguing India. I think whether it is building energy codes, and you mentioned the smart cities. I mean, even the smart city plans that are getting rolled out, energy efficiency, renewable energy, we do believe they need to be very, very, I think, well integrated into those plans. And there are initiatives. I mean, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Ministry of Power, we see more and more interactions happening. For instance, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which is building like tens of millions of homes. So can it be thermally comfortable while we keep it like cheaper and while we actually execute very, very quickly? So I think some of these things we are starting to see. There is also initiatives like district cooling systems, which some of these smart cities are starting to look at, especially for central business districts and those areas where large scale cooling plants can actually be integrated. I have one other question before I'll have a concluding question. Um, at AEEE, we are true believers like in integrated frameworks, and we feel that energy efficiency and renewable energy are two facets of the same coin. And you may be aware about one program where we are really integrating energy efficiency and renewable energy, and that is the Solar Decathlon India, where we follow this lean, mean, and green principle, where we say that the building needs to be designed, I think, in the most sustainable fashion using building physics and building science concepts. Then they need to use the most efficient technology to meet the load, whether it's heating load, whether it's lighting load, whether it's cooling load. So you have all the lighting, cooling, every technology that can actually be used. And then whatever electricity demand that is remaining, that needs to be met with renewable energy. So I think if we have this kind of integrated frameworks, and if we work with the younger generation, the architectural community, the engineering community, to design from the first principles, then we believe, I think, some of the things that you are mentioning, that how do we really make energy efficiency as an underlying culture for the country, I think that will start to deliver some of these things. So just I think I want to once again get your thoughts on that. How do you see that? I think you talked about that different ministries also working, I think, together to create these kind of integrated policies. How do you see that? I think organizations like IRENA, which are, of course, I think, established for renewable energy promotion and investments. How do you see, I think, IRENA working with other organizations, say like AEEE or others who work with energy efficiency? How can we work together to actually push an integrated approach to decarbonization?
I think it's a very good question, Satish, because um, the whole game plan or has actually changed. So it's for us, it's no more about just renewables. It's about the many actions that are needed to be able to take the planet to the 1.5-degree scenario, which means that you're looking at mitigation, you're looking at adaptation, and you're looking at a whole ecosystem around it. So, while in the last decade, our focus was really only on renewables because that is pretty much a mandate. But now, with our mandate getting expanded and mainstreamed into more of an energy transition, we feel that if we have to make a difference, it cannot be by just carrying the flag on your own. It's not going to happen. It's a very large area, and we need to really partner with entities that are making the difference in renewables, in energy efficiency, in electrification in general, because without that kind of a collaboration, we are not likely to see results. Our also our focus, to some extent, we are also shifting our focus of talking now to regulators. Mostly the regulators that we spoke to earlier were electricity regulators, but now we are expanding our scope to start also speaking to the regulators who are in the end use sectors, because the end use is going to be the real drivers of change. And it's as you can imagine, it's a very slow moving, highly segmented kind of a space. So our emphasis now is to start looking at the variety of actions that a country will need to be able to take in different sectors to come together holistically as an integrated, set of climate suitable action plans to make the right trajectory. So definitely, I think we do see our role having got expanded with the shift in focus that the whole Glasgow discussion and the discussions on climate during the COVID have brought about.
Energy transition, decarbonization, climate action, I think these are all going to be with us, I think, in this century, we believe. Gauri Madam, I want to end on a slightly lighter note. Uh, and I would request you to please share the secret sauce of how do you make renewables such a strong value proposition for everybody. Young professionals want to join the sector. Political leaders want to outdo each other in terms of announcing new targets. And heck, even the financing and investment community falls head over heels to put more money into this sector. And then we have the energy efficiency community where uh, uh, we struggle with a visual image of energy efficiency. We can't think beyond LEDs or a CFL to communicate, I think, what this industry is about. So if you can just share the magic formula on how to make energy efficiency more sexy, I think that I'm sure that a lot of us would be listening very, very, I think, intently to your closing remarks.
I think uh, I'll just maybe give you a kind of a recollection of how when in 2009, I still remember I got called on one June afternoon to the PMO, and I was informed that, look, we are going ahead, and the Prime Minister would be announcing 7 or 10 missions at the global stage. One of them is going to be the National Solar Mission. And what we have written is, and it was exactly one sentence, which said that we commit to getting by 2022 20,000 megawatts. And you can imagine that in June 2009, except in a laboratory setup, it was pretty much, there was just no grid connected solar. And that's how this whole journey of getting a national solar mission into being, and then working with the private sector and other stakeholders, and getting a way of creating that impetus which started exciting private sector. Banks were not willing in the first set of things, so creating risk mitigation measures to be able to do that. And that's when you started this whole community of IPPs really growing. And even though that wind has been the wind energy sector has been there with India for a long time, but it wasn't really catching the fancy because there were no IPPs in it. So it wasn't the next generation of smart professional entities like the IPPs that came into the solar, which brought with it the kind of glamour that has now got attached to solar. So what we are sitting at the cusp of, Satish, and I really believe in this, is, and our PM always speaks about it, is that we want to become the startup capital of the world. Now, energy efficiency is so technology driven, and it is so driven by, and the kind of enabling framework that technology platforms can create. I think that's the space that needs to be just explored. And it won't happen, and I'm sorry I'm repeating this, but it really won't happen till we have a good and well coordinated policy in place, and have it by the name of something really attractive that catches the imagination of the nation. Because now it's all about how you communicate the benefits of something. So it's so much of a, it's like a branding and a communication exercise. We have the wherewithal to make it a success, but I think we're not getting it into the national narrative, which I think a well thought out coordinated policy framework can do. And if it gets the attention of Niti Aayog and the PM, then it's the whole narrative can change around it.
Gauri Madam, thank you so much. I think this event itself, Forum on Energy Efficiency and Decarbonization, this is sort of our small attempt to actually inject some fresh ideas and energy, and especially, I think, make both the public as well as the private sector, I think, work together and solve this issue, because I think you are absolutely right that energy efficient technology could be the linchpin, could be the cutting edge. I think whether we are talking buildings, transportation, industrial segment, and so much new technology is coming into this space every day. And I think with your advice and guidance and the wisdom that you have shared, I think on this fireside chat, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and thanks for spending this time with us and sharing, I think, what IRENA is doing, why energy efficiency and renewable energy need to work together, and how I think India can be a leader in this space. Thank you so much, and again, have a nice remaining part of the day.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you once again, Ms. Gauri and Dr. Satish. It was a pleasure listening to both of you. And I think the best part about the entire thing was talking about how to make energy efficiency sexier. So all of us youngsters have caught your sentences, and Dr. Satish, they'll be going into our report soon. So, well, with that, I think we come to the end of a very, very revving fireside chat today on the triple sector approach to achieving decarbonization. I'd also quickly like to thank all our sponsors here. So, for the entire event, we had our platinum sponsor as Danfoss, our gold sponsor, The Breed, our silver sponsor, Saint Gobain and Smart Jewels. A big thank you to all of you for your support in each and every form. So, very quickly, the audience, we have our next event, which is going to be the structured expert dialogue, and this will be on the role and importance of multilateral and bilateral organizations and foundations in India's decarbonization journey. So, this dialogue is going to start at sharp 5 p.m. And like all of you must have gotten the hang of the platform now, you go back to your lobbies through the auditorium area, you'll be easily redirected towards this new dialogue that's coming up. So, a very big thank you to all of you, and see you for the next session.